All right, let's go ahead and start with the explaining the auto layout. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new project, and we're going to call it a single view, nothing unusual. I'm going to call that layout, auto layout 1, for example, and I'm going to call this video. All right. Here, we select the language, and then here, as you see this, I'm going to select universal. That means that it can run on an iPad and it can run on an iPhone. So I'm going to click on next, and I'm going to put it here on desktop, iOS material here. All right, and then I'm gonna do it in the videos here. Okay, so create. All right, let's take a look at the main storyboard. Everything looks okay, and here is, by the way, if you want to support certain orientation or not. Now, because we're doing auto layout, we're gonna allow these orientations, okay? So if you want your app to only run on portrait and it runs on an iPhone, for example, you can just unselect these and then do this one here only, all right? Let's select the main storyboard and see what we have. Now, in the past, I used to show you this. I used to say, let's disable something. When we look at the identity inspector, we used to disable the auto layout and the size classes. But now we want to make sure that we use those. So those are checked. Use auto layout and use size classes. Okay, that's one. The next thing that we have here is that, do you see this? You can actually specify the screen size here. If you click on this, you can say, I want it to run on compact devices, such as here you can explain, example 3.5 inch, 4 inch, and 4.7 inch for iPhones, portrait or landscape, right? So this is, you can specify that. So if you specify this, this is what you're gonna get, all right? But because we want more than that, we wanted to do it, also run it on iPad, so I'm gonna do the any width and any height. Okay, you get that? So this is what we need to do first. I'll explain these in a minute. So what I want to create, like if we have a menu, like if you're designing a game and then your game has like a small menu at the beginning, and then when it starts, this menu will have options, buttons, whatever. You can click on it and it does something for you. Okay. Let me show you the problem that we have without auto layout. So if I select, this is a view, and if I add another view here, and I'm gonna put, you can put your buttons inside that view. If I can find the view, I can just type it here, UI view. Okay. And then if I click on this view and add it to my screen. All right, and I'm gonna size it. Make it look smaller. You can't see it because it's white. Let's do this. I'm gonna make it, change the background color to orange, okay? Okay, so that's what you used to do. Okay, so now let's run it and see what happens. If we run it, this is in the landscape mode. I'm gonna use the command and the arrow to turn the device, command and arrow. Now this is the portrait, okay? I'm just gonna compare the two and show you. All right, see this and see this here, see the spacing. So the position is not in the same, this position of this view is not in the same area that I'm expecting it to see, all right? So this is one issue. And when I turn it, again, it's better, but still maybe not what I want. Here it's worse, okay, because half of the rectangle is gone. I'm returning it. I'm just hitting the command and the right arrow, okay? Well, what are we gonna do with this? All right, well, let's introduce the auto layout. Let's say I want this rectangle to be the same size, this size, and I want it to be always in the center of my device. All right, so how do we do this? First, let me introduce you to the alignment. Do you see this? There is something called alignment section. So I want to select it, and I can align this by saying I want to align it horizontally and vertically. So this will be centered. And at the bottom, you see two things. One is that update frames and update add to constraint. What you've just done, you're added a rule. Think about a constraint as a rule. It says the rule for this is that when it is displayed, the constraint, it should appear in the middle of the screen, no matter what, whether it is turned right, turned left, right, running on a different device, and so forth. All right. So if I add these to constraint, and then this is important, you can say, I want to update the item that I'm adding constraint to, because if you don't do this, I'll show you, it'll give you, do you see these? Do you see this arrow? And then there is this one here, this yellow thing that you don't see properly. These are your constraint, and they are in orange color. In orange color means that you have issues. So you see that when I click on it? If you don't see this, you just click on expand it here, and then you see that you have issues. And the issues say that, wait a minute, I don't know how, after I use, you want to use layout, but you're saying this, the size of this is not specified. Are you sure you want to do this? Because if you do this, the result is unpredictable and sometimes it crashes. So what do you need to do? You need to fix this issue. And to fix this issue, you need to add what we call, for now, you want to add size constraints. Now, there's other ways to solve it, but which said that I want it to be the same size and I want to add a constraint to it. Well, I'll show you two examples of this. So this is one, okay? And I'll show you how we add that. Now, here, remember I said you can update the frame. There is another option here, resolve auto layout. You select it and then click on this. This is funny. Sometimes you have to select it twice. Select it twice, and then here you can say update frames. Now, if you do update frames, it's gone, and it's not gone. It's right here because the size is 0. All right. So I'm going to select this again, and I'm going to go back to something next to the alignment. And this one here says, we will talk about these here in a minute. I can say specify the size here. I want to add 2 constraints to the size. So if I want to make it 300 by 300 or 250 by 250, and then I add my constraints. Okay, so do you see that? Now I can update my frame again, and it should appear. Now all the lines are blue. That means that the application is happy. All right, so let's run it and see what happens now. I'm running it on a device, iPhone 6. I'm going to run it on different devices so you can see the difference. So now if I run it on iPhone 6, it should be in the middle, no matter what the orientation is, and the size should be fixed. So if I do command, 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 okay, it looks fine. So this is what you want. If you have a menu that you want it to appear in the middle of the screen, and it doesn't matter how you turn your screen, so we achieved that. Now inside that view, you can put your buttons. We can add a button later on. All right. So this is fine. Okay. So now let's run it on a different device. I'm going to run it on iPhone 5 and see how it looks. Okay. Smaller screen, and let's see what happens. fine. The spaces, not see the spaces here. And then look, if I do command again, I'm fine. See it? Okay, good. If you run it on iPad, resizable iPad, or and then you can say run it. Now it's going to be bigger than the screen, but that's fine. You can see it, okay? And because it is scrolled, do you see that? So now it is centered in the screen. All right, so that is the first part. Now, what if I don't want all these constraints? If I want to make my own constraints again, and I want to remove them. Now, a word of advice, maybe this is what you should do. Instead of trying to add more constraints, you clear your constraints first, and you can do what? You can add them later on. There's two ways to do that. If you want to delete all your constraints, you can do it from here. Clear constraints for that object that is selected. Okay, and that would do it. Another way, you can go to do you see this? This is the size indicator, show size indicator. I can go in here, and I have all my constraints here. Align center to the Y, the width is constrained, and the height constraint. You can edit these by adding in here. So my constraint, I want it to be equal to 250. There are others, but we will cover them later on, hopefully, okay? There's something called priorities. Which one do I want to do first? So you can have multiple priorities. I want to do this first. If this works, continue, and so forth, okay? So you can say what the order of changes that you want, okay? So you can do that from here. Okay, now you can edit it or you can just delete them. So if you select them, you can delete them. And the other way, so there's two constraints, and notice now it changed the whole thing. Now I can go back here, select it again, and do clear constraints. Okay, so all the constraints are done. All right, let's show you if I wanted this to be on this position all the time, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, and I want it to be. Well, let's leave it this way first. And it doesn't matter. And this size can be flexible here. Okay, I can grow this way, depending on the screen size. Okay, but I want these spaces to be fixed all the time, from here to here. And the size, I don't want it to grow this way. I want it to be, the size here is fixed. But I could, depending on the screen size, I can grow back and forth. Could be like a menu, if you will. So what you do in here, you can add, let's go back to here and add few constraints. Now, we haven't talked about these. Here, you can say, you can specify, I want this part to be fixed. I want it to be appear from this side all the time. So if I say at this position all the time. So if I click on this is like the stretches that we had before, okay? So if I say here, if I click on this, and then I click on this top part, in the view that I'm in. So do you see that? This is in the view that I'm in the margin of view that I'm in, that is checked. This is the default. So now what happens if I do this, if I add these two constraints, if I do add these new two constraints and update the screen, notice what's going to happen. Add. Okay. Well, it did that, but because I did not specify the size here, it assumed that there is a problem. I can, assume that it's confused. What do you want to do with this? Okay. So what do you want to do? Again, you need to add constraints. Now, one way to do that, you can remember I want it to grow this way, but I don't want it to grow this way. So you can specify, let's say I'm going to just do this here. I can specify another constraint here. I want to do the height constraint, and again, update the item. hit OK. So that's the height. So the height, now this blue is this blue, but there is a problem with this one. Okay. What it means that I don't know, I cannot determine the position of this because what happens here? It doesn't know. Well, what happened here, if you want this to be fixed and this is to be fixed, what you can do is that you can go in here, let's say, add another constraint here. So for example, you can select this and add a constraint here, which is this one. So it will be always 242 from this part, from this side. Okay. So if I do the constraint, no, this is not going to work properly. I'll fix it and I'll show you. If I do this and add the constraint, so now all the constraints are yellow, blue, and then it's happy. But there's a problem. Let me show you what the problem is. You can run it on iPhone 5, for example, and run the screen. This will be small. Why is this small? I'll show you. Oh, actually, there's a problem here because probably I'm outside the boundaries. Okay, let me fix that. We get a problem here. It says there's a problem because your constraint cannot be achieved, all right, because of the size of the screen. So what I'm going to do, I want to make this is a little bit bigger here. And then you can update your constraint by clicking in here and do update constraint. All right, let's see what happens now. Okay, notice, because now the size, what I specified, I want this rectangle to be always at least this distance from here and from here, and from here it's fine. So now it can determine the size. Now, if you turn it, this will grow based on the room that you have on the room of the size of the screen, because I said I want to maintain this distance from this side, so it will expand the size of your view. So it's up to you how you want to do this. And this is another iteration. You got the idea? And then you go back and you return it. So if you have a menu, for example, and then you want to put this stuff in the menu on top, this is one way of doing it, okay? All right, if you don't want that, if you don't want to do the expansion, of course, what can you do? You can go back in here and do what? Select that, and then you can remove this constraint. If you want it to be always the same size, you can update the constraint. And here, because this might cause you a problem, okay, instead of this, you can delete this constraint by selecting it and deleting it. Now we have a problem. Now I have to give it a size constraint, okay, the width, and then now it should be okay. Now if you do this, you run it, doesn't matter your orientation or the screen size, doesn't matter, it's always the same size, but it's not floating all over the place. At least it is predictable where it will be. All right, the last thing I'm going to show you, and we'll be done with this video, is you look at, maybe you don't want to wait until you run your application to see how it was going to look on different devices. So there is another tool that you can do here. It's a great tool by Apple, which is, do you see this code assistant? Remember we used it with the View controller. If you click on that, this is the code, but there is something called here manual. Where is the auto? Okay. Oh, here, sorry, automatic. I don't want automatic. I can select manual, and there's something called preview. So here is, it's running on an iPhone 5, 4-inch, and then you can turn it here and see how it's going to look in here. You got it? Or you can do what? You can add more devices if you want. Add, for example, iPhone 6, and here's how it's going to look. And I've noticed it looks very similar. The position stays the same. And now if you do this, you turn it, and then was still predictable. And you can add more if you want. All right. So that is the end of this. We have a lot more. I'm going to cover probably 2 more videos related to this to make more complex views and layouts. But for now, that should get you started with UI views. And I will see you in the next videos.